Greetings, patrons and creative writing folks that aren't here with us tonight. I'm Captain Logan, of course, and we've got 4 writers tonight. We're going to read a little bit and chat about their stories. We record this, as always, for folks that didn't make it. Back Studios couldn't be here tonight. He is working Toy Story 4 at the movie theater he works at, and so hopefully he's able to join us next time. But Fridays have been difficult for him lately. How have you guys been since I saw you last? It's been, what, 3 months?
Feels like it's been forever.
It's almost been a year since we started this, actually.
Wow, that's nuts.
August isn't like 2 months yet. So, like, I don't know the amount of time between last time, but, you know, that's the thing.
Yeah, I think it was maybe February. I forget now, but definitely wanted to bring it back. You guys have been great. This has been a really fun thing to do, and everybody in this group has improved immensely as we've been moving along. It seems like it's been really useful for folks, and it's my element. I really missed workshopping. I guess I don't anymore because I do it now. It's wonderful. It's very exciting. Before we jump straight into the workshopping, let me just mention that we have a new person tonight. Wendell joins us and wrote some science fiction for us that we're going to read a little bit later. Wendell, you're going to go last this evening.
Okay.
Is that right?
I got a comfy chair. It's good. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Hopefully you can stick around that long. If anybody needs to leave early, let me know and we'll rush your piece to the front. But otherwise, I've got an order tonight. I just wanted to read these in the order that I wrote notes on them. That helps me a lot. But does anybody just really want to go in any particular order? You guys, everybody good with that?
No. Right.
I'm good with however you want to do it.
Jacob, I think that's more of your space than we've ever seen. Or have we had this conversation? I think you talked about your basement last time.
I'm in a different position, and I'm on a whole new computer, so that might be it. I actually built a desktop in the time since we last met, so...
I'm also on a different machine than I was the last time.
Hey.
Yeah, I've got a new production machine. It's been awesome. These live shows have been, if you guys watch them, you've probably noticed, they've been a whole lot more smooth since I got this new machine. It's been absolutely wonderful. How's your machine going for you there, Jacob?
It's pretty awesome. It's a lot better than my laptop was. My laptop was pretty awesome, so...
Do you have a stupid number of screens like I do?
No, I only have the one.
Oh, okay. We gotta have at least 2 screens. 2 screens is so helpful. I have way more than I need. I have 4 right now, and I'm gonna put in a 5th because it's a Batcave and I'm ridiculous. But that's the whole plan. Okay. Anything anybody has been reading in the interim that you want to mention?
I've been reading the Witcher series recently. If you've heard of that game series.
I have. How far in are you? How many books is it?
I think there's like 12, and I've finished one of them, and I'm reading a different one right now. I'm almost all the way through.
Do non-book things count exactly?
Sure. Yeah, what are you reading?
Can I get something real quick? Can you wait like a... Yeah.
Sure, we'll wait with bated breath. Just can't wait.
Something...
This better be worth it.
Something that I moved around and I just found in my old collection of things.
Oh, you got Red Knight.
An independent comic. Oh, how'd you see that before I showed it?
You had it like under you, and I know that cover real well.
Signed by Justin. I can get the thing. Signed by the real Manos.
Nice.
I ran into him at a convention a couple years ago and bought this off of him.
Oh, did you? Cool. I've never even met Manos in person.
He's actually like my height, which is kind of weird, but he looks taller on camera.
I expected him to be really tall. Is he not?
No, he's like 5'8", 5'9".
Is he really? Wow. You guys are still slightly taller than me, because I'm very tiny. But yeah, I expected. Wow. So he was. I don't know what he's doing now, but so that means he was selling lady shoes at like 5'8". I didn't realize that. I just always expected him to like really tower over everybody.
YouTube does that.
Anybody else reading anything interesting?
Not right now.
I've been reading your stories. I had to go to school this week, especially with Jacob's work. I mean, I love it, and we'll get to that in a moment. But yeah, So that was quite a mix. Mystery, sci-fi, fantasy, all in about 4 hours.
You almost said mystery science. I was waiting for theater, but okay.
No, yeah,
Almost.
nobody
Yeah.
put in any theater work. Yeah. Yeah, quite a bit of reading for this group. Although I don't know if we've ever done more than 4 stories. I think this is the max.
Yeah, I think we've only ever done up to 4.
And there have been a lot of meetings where we read 4, but somebody didn't show up, so we actually only did 3. But we've got one guy that I think we've read a story from 3 times that's never been here, or maybe he came like the first week. And I think every time he turned in work, it was always like a total rewrite of the first thing he put in. It's like every
think
time it was
so.
just a complete rewrite.
Yeah, I think so. I remember that.
I don't know if we'll ever meet that guy. But anyway, okay. Well, I have been reading a book that I started years ago. I mentioned this on the channel before, called Tomorrow and Tomorrow, and I've read half of the book twice. And I'm finally trying to actually finish it because it has this like really great premise, and I get really involved in it, and then it turns into an intergalactic war, and I don't care anymore. And it's this it's cool at the beginning because it's such a simple kind of tragic love story thing. It's basically Mr. Freeze, but he's not evil, because it's this guy has a wife who he puts in a cryostasis. But it's in like the mid-90s, and when, cryostasis like still isn't good, but like, it was a dumb idea to freeze people and assume you could, wake them up later on. But she has like a horrible chronic illness that can't be fixed, and he puts her in cryostasis, and then he also puts himself under, and every like 100 or 1,000, and then down the road like several thousand years, he'll get woken up for some reason, figure out that she's not cured yet, and have to go on an adventure, and then get put back in a cryo freeze. And about halfway into the novel, humanity's like not even humanity anymore, and it's like a bazillion years in the future, and he ends up having to help like spearhead this giant galactic war, and that's when it turns into kind of a different thing, and it totally loses me. But I gotta finish it because I've been reading this book since 2003, and I have no idea how it ends. So guys, why don't we go ahead and get started? Jacob, we're going to read some of your story first. So Wendell, what I always do is I read about 1.5 pages, 2 pages out loud, just to give the author a sense of what their prose sounds like if somebody else is reading it. Having your work read back to you, I think, is a real important thing. Gives you a sense of somebody else's perspective on it, and helps you to catch stuff that you might not catch otherwise. Obviously, we don't have time to read the entire thing. We would do that if we could, but I'm just going to do kind of a sampling, and that will also kind of jar everybody back into remembering what happens in this. Did everybody manage to read everything for today? I know it was a lot of reading this time.
I read most of Wendell's work, but I didn't get to all of it.
Yeah, I read a little bit of everyone's.
I read all of them except Jacob's, because I was trying to go back and reread the whole thing, and I didn't quite catch up yet. But
oh wow, yeah,
I read everyone else.
That's like 150 pages or whatever.
Yeah, I didn't realize we had gone through that much. That was poorly planned on my part.
Yeah, I got through everything, but it was tough. Yeah, my apologies, because my story was pretty damn long. I overwrite a lot, if that wasn't obvious. So yeah.
Well, not to get into your story yet, but I didn't feel like it was overwritten. It was just, a couple of pages past the count, but like it was natural for the chapter you're writing. I guess it could be maybe broken up into a couple, okay, but we'll talk about it. Okay, I'm gonna read some of chapter 7 because that's where exciting things are happening, and I want to read some exciting things. Are you ready? Here we go. This is Jacob Shiner, chapter 7. He doesn't title his chapter, so it's just chapter 7. Here we go. For a terrifying moment, a feeling of complete weightlessness settled over Marcus before he landed heavily with a series of sharp snaps on the pile of corpses. I just thought we'd start bright and chipper. He tumbled down the side, unable to control his descent as the mace was jarred from his grasp and went sailing through the air. Finally, he came to a stop, landing with a splash in a puddle of mud. A wave of exhaustion washed over him as he struggled to his feet. Marcus turned back towards the fortress, a sudden feeling of disbelief welling up within him. I'm actually doing it, he thought with excitement. Then, his elation turned to guilt when he thought about the other still trapped within. His heart fell. I'm sorry. Marcus apologized as he turned away and retrieved the mace before tearing into the rope binding his wrists with his teeth. Moments later, his bonds fell away, filling him with a sudden sense of weightlessness. It was as if a weight that he'd always borne was simply gone now, and he felt that if he wasn't careful, he might simply lift off the ground and float into the sky, never to return. Marcus shook his head as he turned to Abelia, who stopped staring up at the fortress, tears spilling from her eyes. She coughed, sending thick splotches of blood into the muck underfoot. Julius, she breathed as Marcus approached her. Abelia, he gasped, gently placing a hand over hers. She was trembling, but he wasn't sure if it was because of fear, sadness, or both. Marcus glanced back at the wall. He could still hear Dymas, Gaius, and the stranger barking orders to the slaves and guards inside. Abelia, we aren't safe yet. There will be time to weep for him, but we need to get away first. Abelia glanced at him, her eyes filled with anguish and tears. A moment passed before she finally nodded and let him pull her along into the dark forest, yawning before them. Marcus had lost track of how long they'd been running. His arms and legs had turned to lead long ago, and the mace had grown heavy in his fist. Still, he didn't want to stop, even as his breath came out in short, ragged gasps. He could hear Abelia panting and coughing, struggling to keep her up as he cut a jagged path through the forest, ducking and weaving around the trees. Marcus had no idea where they were going. All those days he'd looked out over the forest from the top of the walls had done nothing to show him just how confusing the forest actually was. It all looked so different than he was expecting. Alien. But then again, he hadn't known what to expect. Did you think there would be a sign that said, "This way to freedom, you idiot"? He chastised himself as he rounded a large tree. He shook his head and wiped rain from his eyes as he finally slowed to a stop, gasping for air. Let's take a moment, he gasped, leaping against the tree trunk for support. So yeah, when I want a good laugh and to get a big smile on my face, I read Jacob's work. Let's start this evening with Dimitri.
Well,
Because you read a lot of this
whole
recently.
thing, as I said. So,
okay, so did you not get to any of 6 and 7?
I think like the halfway through the first chapter. But since I read everything like concisely, like in a
I'm
row,
sorry, I forgot you said that. Good.
Yeah, I think I noticed as I was reading it and I'm listening to it just now, your descriptions and your imagery has like significantly improved the most. I feel.
Yep.
Of all of the qualities of your writing, like that was the first, well, toward the end mostly, but like that just now was the first time like I didn't really have any trouble visualizing what you said, and I didn't really feel. Okay, sorry about that. I didn't really feel like things were worded in a different way. Like it all flowed naturally, and I was like able to just follow the story and get engrossed in it. And the pacing, I guess, I don't know if it's really improved. Things are happening now, so it's less like difficult to keep reading, keep it all in your head, since it's like actual events happening and whatnot. I guess that's all I have to add.
Yeah, thanks, man. I forgot you said that you hadn't read all of this. Wendell, did you catch up on this entire novel, or did you just read 6 and 7 and just hope you knew what you were looking at?
No, I read from chapter 1 through to chapter 8.
Wow, that's really cool of you to do that.
Yeah, it was the first story. Well, I saw Jacob put like a comment on Patreon, like anyone new, just catch up. So I did. I'm caught up. I'm tired, but I'm caught up. I'm not tired of the story, by the way. Just tired of reading so much. Yeah, good thing. I'm pleased that at least in these chapters, I'm pleased that Marcus is being proactive. and I guess I should preface my comments with like I read a lot of fantasy, I read a lot of sword and sorcery, and Brandon Sanderson among other things. So this is right up my street, and yeah. So another good thing that I appreciated was the imagery, as Dimitri mentioned, all throughout the story. Um, my kind of not so good thing is the pacing is a tad slow, but that's that might be just my personal taste. So take that comment with a grain of salt. But I think that because I read from chapter one, I think the inciting incident, the moment like he kind of jumps over the wall, could maybe happen sooner in the story, because I think if I remember right, and perhaps not, but I think he's been in this slave camp all his life. So I feel like maybe his anger could come to the forefront maybe a little sooner, and I was maybe missing that like point, that moment where he like decided, okay, this is it. And then kind of along the lines of that pacing issue, like there were some moments where I really appreciated the description, but when he was being chased through the forest, I was thinking, God damn, dude, stop nodding and waiting. Just go, go, go. Like, there's arrows whizzing past you. And so, yeah, but it was great. It was a really great read. And yeah, I need to step up my game. So I enjoyed it.
I'm glad.
Brendan, let's hear from you, man.
Yeah, I'm exactly. I think this was good. I don't have any. I didn't get to read as much of this one as I did the others, but I felt a little bit more involved, a little bit easier to get into this one, this part than I had previously. So I am going to go back and read the rest of it, but I only got a couple of pages into this one. But yeah, I was enjoying what I was reading. That's all I've got to say, and I enjoyed this part that I hadn't heard before. But yeah, nothing.
Oh yeah, spoilers. Sorry. Jacob, you're continuing to hear the patient criticism a lot.
Yeah, I've noticed.
So I remain of two minds about the pacing thing. Before I get to that, let me just say I opened my notes with, well, this was the moment we've all been waiting for. We finally get out of the camp. We finally, as Wendell so aptly put it, we finally see the guy be proactive. Throughout the first several chapters, I found myself a little bit frustrated that he wasn't proactive, but also understanding and kind of appreciating the fact that he wasn't. There's this worldview thing here. There's this indoctrination. There's this notion that the guy's been a slave his whole life. He's used to that. The idea of freedom almost doesn't even compute to him. So he doesn't have anything to compare it to. So the anger doesn't happen until he begins to get some perspective. Part of that perspective comes from his learning that the warden guy is his dad and that he put him there, and that's going to tick off anybody. And also just, friends that he sees getting hurt, and the initial inciting incident, I think this strikes me more as like a first act plot point, like because what kind of gets the ball rolling and makes the story start, even if it's a bit slow at the beginning, is we're building this machine, whatever this machine is, and we're ramping it up, and the stranger guy has shown up, and like stuff's happening, and all of the slaves are being treated even worse now because we're trying to hurry up and get this thing done real fast. And like that's what starts the guy on a slow but sure journey to finally, I'm gonna break out of this camp and start a revolution. If we started, so this is why I'm of two minds about it. I did find myself frustrated through part of it where I was like, okay, I know eventually we're getting out of this camp. Like, can we just make that happen? Because I'm kind of bored with the shackles and the bleeding and the dying. And then all this interesting stuff starts happening around his father and the stranger, who I'm finding absolutely fascinating, and again, this machine that's being built. And I wrote this in my notes. When we get out of the camp, I weirdly want to go right back to the camp, because now there's all this fascinating stuff and like, I'm really impressed with you for doing that, because I was ready to leave, and now I'm like, oh crap, this is like a be careful what you wish for thing. This is a grass is always greener thing, because I know I'm gonna have to wait until probably the end of the book to learn a lot of those, the answer to a lot of those mysteries. Who is the stranger? What is the stranger? And why does he find fire so amusing? Like he really likes just watching things burn, and I want to know why. But yeah, I immediately, have a picture of that guy in my head, as drawn naturally by Todd McFarlane. And anyway, so I was gripped by these chapters, Jacob. Like I said, this was the stuff we were kind of waiting to happen, and I don't think it would have been as satisfying if it wasn't such a slow burn at the beginning. Of course, the risk you run is losing the reader until you get to that part. But like I think you push it as far as you could possibly push it. I certainly wouldn't add anything, and there certainly may be some things that you can take out here and there. I'm gonna echo Wendell. Talking about places where the narrative gets bogged down a little bit by almost too much internal monologue. When we started reading this book, I didn't feel like I was in this guy's head at all, and you flipped that, and it's good, and it's consistent, and I understand this guy, and I know why he's doing the things he's doing, but we get, and I've mentioned this to you before, and we've still got that problem here. We get bogged down a little bit too often with like the guy's exact pulse rate almost, and things like that, where like the details of the way the guy is breathing and the feelings of weightlessness and all of those things, it's a little more than we need. Some of it is also just really redundant. There's a place where he's feeling nauseous, and then a page and a half later, he's feeling nauseous. And I was like, has enough time passed where he wouldn't still be nauseous from the last time he was nauseous? And
yeah, can I add to that?
Yeah, go right ahead, sure.
Yeah, it's like, I actually renamed this, I downloaded this and renamed it on my computer moments later, because there are so I say that with love, Jacob, but and hopes to befriend you, not alienate you. But yeah, there were times, particularly with like swallowing, where you would write like a lump formed in Marcus's throat, and then 2 sentences later, Marcus tried to no avail to swallow the lump in his throat. And I was thinking, God damn, dude, he better have magic in his saliva, because if this isn't some kind of foreshadowing, then maybe it's a bit heavy-handed. But yeah, there was a little bit of repetition, and I maybe noticed that a lot throughout all of the chapters, not just the ones we were looking at today. But yeah, there was a lot of swallowing, and I was wondering that, like, is it going to get to the point where Marcus like inhales and then exhales and then it's the end? So yeah, and I say that as a big fantasy writer, like I really want this story to be the best it can be. So yeah, I say those comments with love. Sorry if that's too harsh, but yeah.
No, I appreciate the criticism. I really do.
Yeah, and one more thing. Sorry to take over, Kat, but like it's a small thing, really small thing. But sometimes when you would describe like these abstract concepts, like it's he felt something, but halfway between fear and anger, and I'm left for a moment thinking, how do I define fear again? And how do I define anger? And what's in between those? And it kind of took me out of the story for a moment.
You get almost existential in your own head, where like you're questioning the way you look at things. Yeah.
Exactly.
I was trying to experiment with words and phrases there, so I understand that.
Yeah. It worked. And there's some great lines too. You know, that I've got a whole page of like great lines. So I'll send you those later.
Yeah, Wendell, don't worry, man. This is a real respectful group, and don't feel like you have to hold back your punches, because we're all here for the same thing, and I think everybody knows your heart's in the right place. Yeah, I think the thing, Jacob, you're kind of struggling with is, like, making us understand what the guy is feeling versus making us understand, like, how he's feeling, and you just turn it too physical more often than you need to. Like, less is kind of more with that. You got a lot of, it seems like you're constantly building suspense when sometimes the suspense is being built really naturally just in what is happening already. Like, you've got such a good sense of stakes and putting your character in peril, and it doesn't seem to me like, Jacob, you will ever have the problem of being afraid to kill your darlings. You don't seem to have that problem at all, and it doesn't seem like you're ever going to have the problem of making the universe coalesce to your protagonist. If anything, sometimes it feels like it's the opposite of that, and it's almost like too much sometimes. And I'm not telling you to change any of that yet. I kind of need to see the whole thing as a piece. But, like, I need this guy at some point to have a happy moment, man. Like, he's going to need to sit down and get to, like, open a bag of chips at some point. Because he's having a bad couple of days, man. Like, it's like when you're watching a season of 24 and you're just like, God, Jack Bauer, have a sandwich. Go to the bathroom. Something. And it's just relentless right now. But having said that, you totally subverted my expectations with the death at the end of Chapter 8. Or 7. I did not see that coming at all. And, yeah, I hate to ruin things for people, but there's death. There's a person that dies. Anyway, but I felt the need to mention it because you really got me with that, and it's a wonderfully tender moment. That could have come off sappy, and there are some places where you do come off sappy, and that wasn't one of them, and I think that's hard to do. That's a tough scene to write, and I bought it, hook, line, and sinker. But the thing with them that I didn't really care for was the we're in this together, you and I. I think that phrase needs to go just from everything. I think, like, you and I is done. That's gotten, like, that's become such a cliche phrase. Like, I think 20 years ago was fine. I don't think you can do it anymore. I just think it's everywhere, and it makes me laugh every time because it's gotten so melodramatic. Like, it's not your fault. It just got really overused, and I laugh every time I see it now. It's like all those years ago. Stop writing it.
While we're on that, let me mention the moment where I laughed out loud and spilled water all over my brand new keyboard. It's just about the time he's about to jump over the wall, and he turns around to his father and just flips the bird at him. I wasn't expecting that in a fantasy story, and fantasy needs more comical moments, so I'm like, oh, that's perfect. Don't get rid of that. Keep it in.
That's true. Wendell,
I'm glad you appreciated that.
do you feel like there's a line that Jacob's walking with old school, like old world and contemporary? Like, there are places where phraseology seems almost too contemporary, but I can't decide.
No. I read a lot of Brandon Sanderson, and I don't know if that's like an influence, Jacob. You can tell me, but it doesn't feel old. No. It feels quite contemporary, yeah, in what he's using. But not in a bad way.
That's what I mean, though. Not that it's too old. That there are some places where I'm not sure I buy the more contemporary lingo. The part with I can't remember what it was, but it was like something bitch, and I was like, I don't know about that. Wasn't sure about that.
Yeah, well, I would define not that I'm saying Jacob is starting a new genre, but maybe but like
I'm
I
going
wouldn't call it.
to rewrite this as a sci-fi.
Oh, please do. I'd love that. No, I wouldn't call it sword and sorcery. I would call it blood and muck, because I really like that imagery that you've used. It's kind of just it's quite refreshing, you know. And to have 3 fantasy books on the go at the moment to come into this, it was really nice to just see a different style to it. I really enjoyed it. I think your style and voice is there. Yeah.
Before we let Jacob ask us some questions, Wendell, since we haven't got to talk to you, I got to ask you the question. I got to ask you a question about a thing that I always bring up with this book, which is, did you, especially toward the beginning, pick up on things that felt sort of like ancient Rome?
Yes.
Good!
Nice.
See, I told you,
Yes,
Jacob!
yes,
100% Rome!
yeah.
He says he didn't do it on purpose. He's got Marcus and Gaius, and I don't believe him.
Yeah, that happens a lot in fantasy. There's similar things like that, and so maybe it's not too much of a problem for me, and I'm just used to the names now, especially after reading 8 chapters. But yeah, I was getting that feel, that vibe, but the plot is different enough that yeah, I wasn't thinking too much of it. But I really latch onto names. So like in Brendan's story where you have a character called Lana or Lana or however that's pronounced, like that means wool in Spanish. And so I was sat there throughout the whole story thinking, how does this relate to wool? Like, does she wear woolly jumpers? Like what? So
Don't watch Smallville. You'll be real confused.
right. But yeah.
Did we lose Brendan? Brendan's next. I hope he gets back pretty soon.
Uh-oh.
Look, we can see Jacob's taking up more of the frame now. Yeah, I mentioned that, Wendell, because I don't think it's a problem that it feels ancient Rome inspired. I keep wanting to lead into it, because I'm not a big fantasy guy, I'm not a big sword and sorcery guy, and that was the stuff I was really latching on to, because I do like ancient Rome a lot. And look, there's Eric. And I was like, oh, that's really cool, dude. You're writing a sword and sorcery fantasy thing with Roman influence. And he said, no, I'm not. And I was like, yes, yes, you are.
That was completely unintentional.
That's amazing, because that image has never left my head. Jacob, what questions do you have for us, buddy?
Well, first of all, I'd like to start by saying I'm glad that we finally have another fantasy guy in the group. And I don't really have any questions so much as I was really nervous going into this one because of the last meeting where you guys were saying, I don't know if I'm going to believe when he actually gets a win. And while this might be a bittersweet win for him, it's still a win. So I was really nervous going into that.
I forgot about that. Yeah. No, you nailed it. The thing that's really impressive is that he's got pretty powerful superpowers, but they don't feel that helpful until they are. And I don't mean to say that like he's got plot armor, or that like, you know, in the moment when he uses them, suddenly the world is coalescing to his will. I just mean like I almost forget that he has powers because the odds are so insurmountable. They're almost not that useful a lot of the time.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
that's great, because that's difficult to pull off. Usually when you got superpowers, it's like you just come up with any way that your powers can get you out of a situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was really nervous going into this.
Sorry, Jacob. Yeah, and also to add, like, I noticed in the last, because I took a coffee break or whatever between reading chapters 1 to 5 and chapters 6 to 8, and when I returned, like, there were definitely moments when like Marcus left, so there were some like positive moments in there. I don't know how far you were pushing that, but maybe to echo what Cap said, you know, I think that having some lighter moments might help a bit. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe not eating chips, but yeah, something like although if he's
just the first thing that came to my mind.
Right. Yeah, surprises. No, and I'm really interested in where it's going. Like it's definitely got me. There's a nice hook there with this cloud, this fog, so I'm intrigued.
Yeah, I think the lighter moments are just a lot harder in the situation that we were in, and I'm assuming that he's going to go on adventures where he will occasionally maybe find something to be sort of happy about. Even if it's not a bag of chips. Okay, so I don't know what happened to Brendan. Hopefully he pops back in. I can't imagine what we might have said to make him angry. I don't know why he's gone.
I mean, I'm the one on the chopping block, so.
Yeah, exactly. If anybody was going to leave, it was going to be Jacob, and he's still here. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into Dimitri then, and we will take care of Brendan when he gets back. Hopefully he does get back. Let me find my reading. Girl who...
It's possible his thing disappeared or whatever. He might have gotten like disconnected somehow, like his internet went off because he wasn't getting up as he left, so I don't know.
Yeah, he wasn't like slamming things and like I'm done with this, or like I'm gonna go eat some
He just
chips.
turned off.
I have to say, I'm a little surprised that we're not reading the same thing that we've been reading from you, Dimitri.
Oh yeah, well, it's been like a long time since our last meeting, and like we were already a couple things behind, and then I didn't have all the notes from one of the chapters, and I think they were like not everyone was caught up. It was just more simple to start with something new.
And
That's
Yeah, I'm disappointed as well because I read your previous chapters too, Dimitri. In fact, I even watched like the previous workshops just to get to know you guys. It's kind of surreal sitting
Wow.
here, not just with Cap and his amazing purple hair, but you guys too. Like it's
Well,
feel
well, thank you for
famous.
reading that.
Cool.
I didn't know that happened.
it's great. No, it's really good.
Dimitri,
Please
if you,
continue with that.
if you want the rest of that workshop, we will absolutely take care of it and do the best we can. And we started in a weird place with that because we started a couple chapters ahead and then we went back and we read the earlier chapters. And, yeah, we read
It
that
was
thing.
a Tarantino movie.
Yeah, exactly. We read that thing. I was gonna say we read that thing so out of order that if I sit and read it start to finish, I'm gonna be surprised that it's not nonlinear.
Well,
And for a
if you guys,
split second, I couldn't remember if it was. For a second, I was like, I'm pretty sure it's chronological from beginning to end, but
Yeah. Going into
You
this, I was
say
like,
that.
is this going into this? I was like, is this a different Dimitri or?
well, if you guys like after we workshop this one, if you guys like want to, because the thing I sent here is like a series too. So like if you guys want to continue workshopping this or go back to the old one, I guess you can decide at the end of this workshop. I don't know. You guys have all the power there.
yeah, all three of us.
Well, Jacob can Magpie can give his vote.
Yeah, I hope
Yeah,
he
I
come.
guess.
I hope he's able to come back. I haven't heard from him yet. In fact, would you guys give me just a second? Let me check Patreon and see if he has left us anything
Wise idea.
where he's like, Australia's just gone. There is no more Australia. And
Well, it's weird. We meet on summer solstice, right? The longest day of the year. But for Brendan, it's like the shortest day of the year. Like, what's happened? There's a story in that somewhere.
didn't even know that. Okay. Now that I'm done with my loud typing. Let me see. Where do I want to start this one? I think I'm gonna go to Juicy Places tonight, you guys. I'm gonna start this one at the place where we find out that the dad's been cheating. That's where
Brendan said he'd be back in a minute.
Oh, good, sweet,
In case
okay.
you can all get that.
Yeah, I want to start at the place where he just abruptly blurts out, "Well, I found out that you've been cheating on your wife." Can't find that right away. But that part really cracked me up. Dimitri, you can't give me a page number, can you?
I have no idea, but I can look quick.
Well, that's kind of what I meant.
You can-
I didn't expect you to have your page number.
Oh, hold on.
Next time, I just want you guys to have your page numbers memorized. It's very important.
Then I'm writing shorter chapters. Jesus.
You're gonna have to have like an index.
It's page 9, I think.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
I might have
that's-
found it. Okay, I'm just gonna start.
Yeah,
It's loading.
page 9.
Sorry.
You're
Is
fine.
it page 9?
Yeah, it's page 9.
I failed to produce my own number.
This is gonna be really exciting viewing for everybody after the fact. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and just start at the top of page 9. Are you guys ready? Here we go.
Yeah.
Where would you look? Jay retorted, triggering this man's temper even further. And if you haven't noticed, I'm trying to help you. Helping waste my time, Jack continued. You're not gonna figure out anything the cops won't. Jay remained calm, sighed, then cocked his head back as if prepared to gently cut this man down a peg. I can figure out a lot of things, he said. I figured out you're cheating on your wife. The room erupted into gasps and then silence. I bit my tongue and looked back to my inactive laptop screen to avoid eye contact with anyone. You always find a way to make things worse. "What are you talking about?" Mr. McLaurin shot back, as if disgusted by the accusation. Jay didn't answer him directly, but instead turned to Carol. He spoke in a sharp, inquisitive tone. "When you got here, you acted like you've never seen the house before." "I haven't," Carol said, clearly wondering what that had to do with anything. "Jack and Mary just moved here. This is my first time visiting." "No, it's not," Jay answered bluntly, without a second of hesitation. He walked back over to me and grabbed the piece of paper Stephen had brought to me earlier. Of course, he had to call attention to me in the middle of this. "Tara looked up information for me before you got here. She needed to use this password to connect to the McLaurin's Wi-Fi, but you came in and got straight on your tablet to social media while the password was right here. You never saw it or typed it in, so I can only assume your tablet automatically connected. Conclusion, you've been here before." Hey, Brendan's back! Yay!
Yeah, sorry.
Yay.
Welcome back, sir.
Oh, we're like in different spaces now. This is
Yeah,
weird.
I'm gonna move myself so that I'm not blocking anybody. There we go.
Sorry about that. My internet just dropped out for some bizarre reason.
I was
I had
right.
to turn it off and turn it back on again.
Well, that's okay. Welcome back, buddy. Way to figure that out without having to call anybody. Like, did you try unplugging it and plugging it back in? So we weren't sure when you were gonna pop back in, so we are tackling Dimitri's, and then we will do yours right after that.
Okay, no worries.
Conclusion, you've been here before. Carol's face turned white. The loud, bombastic Mr. McLaurin had suddenly seemed to lose his voice. Jay continued. "You were here, but you pretended you weren't. The only reason you would do that is if you were hiding something from someone. I noticed you don't have a wedding ring, so you're single, or at least tell people you are. Single, sneaking into a married couple's home. Oh, and who answered the door when you came." All eyes turned to Mr. McLaurin, whose face was so bright red that it showed even through his 5 o'clock shadow. Pardon me. His eyes, which were previously shooting daggers, had come to resemble that of a deer caught in headlights. "So there, sir," he continued in the most condescending tone he could muster. "I can do my job just fine. Is that proof enough for you? How about you cooperate now?" And let's hear from Jacob, because he was our last author. Go ahead, sir.
So this feels very Sherlock Holmes, and I really like that. I can get behind a mystery story a lot more than I can a romance novel, I guess.
Also,
not that
another
I
reason I
haven't.
decided to change it.
I was a little thrown off that his name is just a letter, so maybe just change that to the name J, I guess. You obviously don't have to, but that's just something that I was taken aback by. And again, I really liked the whole Sherlock Holmes vibe that I got from it. But I don't know that I quite buy the fact that a homeless man was able to stay in the attic for 3 weeks without being noticed at all. Like, I feel like somebody would have either seen him or heard him or something and gone to investigate. So I don't know how to handle that, but yeah.
Can I respond, or like do I have to wait till?
Yeah, why don't we wait till the end, buddy?
Okay.
I will counter that for a second just by saying that whether or not this was Dimitri's intention, the people who live in this house seem like kind of idiots. So
That's fair.
I bought it because I thought there were kind of a bunch of mooks living there. But that's just me, and if that wasn't intentional, that might tell you something, Dimitri. But I'm pretty sure that was on purpose. That guy seems like a complete moron, and his wife's not all that much better.
And I am liking Jay and Tara. I do want to hear more from them. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Okay, I don't usually interject like this. I'm going to go to somebody else here in a second, but I want to weigh in real quick on the one-letter J thing, because there's a thing about that drove me crazy. And I gotta mention it. So obviously, like I don't mind the single letter J thing. And Dimitri has on social media gone by Dimitri J, so I'm assuming that has something to do with that. Go ahead.
Everyone
Go ahead.
assumes that. Actually, it's pure coincidence.
Oh, all right, cool. And somehow I
Sorry.
knew you were gonna say that. Nope, it has nothing to do with that at all. Okay, all right, cool. Well, a detective I am not. Anyway, but so I don't have any problem with that. The thing that drove me crazy that I had to write a note about was when the lady that I think it's the lady that comes in that turns out to be cheating with the husband is kind of like perplexed and taken aback by the fact that the guy's name is Jay, but she just hears the name Jay. She's not seeing it written as a single letter. My real name is Jay. Like, growing up, I was called Jay, and I've never had one person like, really, you're just one letter? That's weird. Like, no one's ever said that to me. And so that scene drove me crazy, because I was like, yeah, they wouldn't respond. Like, nobody would respond that way unless they just saw it written.
Yeah, I would agree.
I
with
forgot
that.
that that's also a full name.
It is. It's also a full name. Jasons are called Jay. Jameses are called James. Jameses are called Jays.
I've been called Jay.
You could do it with any other letter. V, L, M, any other letter. L, but J, it's like, yeah, it's a pretty common name.
Well,
In
maybe
my
not-
defense, no one spells your name that way, so like, it's less common than you'd think. But you're right.
I mean,
although maybe
I met lots of J's. It might have gotten less common lately, but when I was growing up, there were a lot of J's.
maybe don't pick L though. You might get accused of copyright with Death Note for that.
I was thinking that as well.
You only have 26. You know, there's just only so many letters that you can pick. Let's hear from Wendell.
It reads like a published book, and maybe that's because of the formatting. Maybe because it's your amazing writer, which I think you are. But it was so awesome. God, I really need to step up my game. But onto specifics, like there's a lot of impressive things I have to say about this piece. That the prose around your dialogue is top notch, and the chemistry between your characters and how they consider each other is really clear. Like even from the first couple of pages, and not just the protagonists, but the side characters too, because this isn't a small family, and I think you do a really good job of that. The vocabulary's strong, the story's tight, so yeah, it had me hooked. And I know it had me hooked because I kept doing that thing where you read a sentence properly in your head, and you read a sentence and it doesn't, I don't know, it just doesn't form in your head, but you keep reading and you intend to go back to that sentence, but you never do, because you want to know what happens next, and you keep reading and reading and reading and reading, you know, and like 3 pages later, I'm thinking, what sentence was I meant to read again? And I never went back to it, you know, so it was great. I wasn't, yeah, like I felt like I was sensing a little bit of Dirk Gently in this. The way he is and his rapport with Tara West, which is such a great name, by the way.
Wendell, that confirms a thing I knew about you reading your piece, and we'll talk about it later. But I read your piece, and I was like, if he's not a Douglas Adams person, then I'm gonna quit my job.
Yes, and to affirm your confirmation, I know where my towel is. So yeah.
There you go.
My not so good thing / really trying to find something but couldn't. So I feel a bit of a monster, and I'm really nitpicking here. But perhaps I didn't read it properly. Well, I just said that I didn't, but I didn't understand why Tara's father wouldn't want her following in his footsteps a little, or being a detective. It's not that I can't think of reasons for doing that, because it can be a dangerous job, and it sounds like he thinks very little of this Jay person. But if there is one, I'd have liked the story to tell me just a little bit more, or say nothing of it. Because when I'm reading a mystery in particular, like, I'm hanging on to every detail, and I'm not sure which detail is important and which isn't, but I'm hanging on to everything. And I think knowing could inform me a little more of Tara's character, but apart from that, I don't think there's anything here that further drafts won't tighten. It's solid. I'm really impressed with it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Let's hear from Brendan. And I don't know how much of this
Yeah,
Brendan read, but of what you read, what can you
this
tell
one
us?
is probably this is the one I read the most of, and I got to say, I felt like I was definitely reading a young adult, young adult / teenager story. So you got that down really well, and within the first few sentences, I think I knew this the person telling the story's character, and as soon as we met Jay, I was like, damn, I know I know this guy, and I usually see him in the mirror in the morning. So that one I kind of that I kind of picked up on as well. And yeah, so you got this down, and yeah, after it was mentioned that the Sherlock Holmes thing, I kind of got that to vibe too. Yeah, so this was definitely good. This one I didn't want to put down, but I had to because it was getting late, so I had to put it down. But yeah, it was really good.
So, Dimitri, let me apologize in advance because I think I'm going to be the hardest on this. I
Right ahead.
your prose remains impeccable. For the most part. I mean, I got a couple little nitpicky issues here and there, but I mean, like, you've got such a good sense of mechanics, and you've got such a good sense of personal tone, and to echo stuff other people said, these characters are a lot of fun together. You're I'm starting with positives. You've got such a good attention to detail that mystery is a really good wheelhouse for you. This is a thing you should be attempting. You should be trying. It felt from the start like you knew just where you were going, and whether you had to go back and retool this a lot or not, you're setting up a lot of stuff and paying it all off. A lot of really nice bowling pins. You're knocking down your pins. It's a mystery that is incredibly well crafted that I didn't find especially compelling by the end. Just as a mystery, like I was so interested in Jay and Tara that I wanted you to tell a character piece about them while this mystery was unfolding, and the mystery that unfolds by the end was not interesting enough to me to carry the whole story. It felt it felt a little bit old hat, a little bit like I kind of been there and seen things like that before. I feel like I would have called it, and like I said, it's a really well constructed mystery. I buy it, and I buy your character figuring it all out and everything. But by the end, I'm like, okay, if I hadn't thought it was supernatural, because the entire time I thought it was supernatural, and I'll tell you why in a minute. I thought there was a supernatural component to this. Part of it's title, and part of it's that opening monologue thing, which I think which I think you should completely get rid of. By the way, by the end when we find out what it is, I felt a little duped by again that opening thing and the title, and if I hadn't had that, I think I would have called, well, yes, of course she's still in the house. Like, it seems like that's the way these things usually go, is like, oh, she was never gone. She was there the whole time. I didn't call it was a homeless guy that kidnapped her and took him to, I wouldn't call that. And so like that's cool. I've never seen exactly that before. That's all right. But I do think, I'll talk about the supernatural thing in a minute. I do think you're running the risk, and I want to see more of these. You said you're going to write more of these, and it read like a pilot to me. It read like this is like Brendan said, like a young adult novel series where these two are going to go on adventures, and 15-year-olds will read this and think it's fun to see this 15-year-old kid solving all these things and having adults not take him seriously at all, and like all that's really fun. But I'm afraid that you're running the risk of looking too derivative of Sherlock Holmes before you start giving more character stuff about Jay. When we get to the end and he's got like a tragic backstory that tells us like why this is a thing that he is pursuing, but also why he refuses to take money, I'm way more interested at that point, because before I thought it was just another modern Sherlock Holmes thing. He's eccentric, he's antisocial, he's not paying attention to anybody around him, he doesn't care about tearing families apart, he's got a partner that goes around with him and logs everything, and you even have that moment at the end where she like breaks everything down and is wrong, and everybody looks at her like she's a moron, and that's a Holmes Watson thing. It verged on being too derivative, and I think you could very easily. Oh, we lost Wendell. And I think all you got to do is form that character more. And I'm not telling you to change anything. I'm telling you to add some stuff. as you're moving along. Like I want to see an opportunity for change. I think like I don't mean every story has to necessarily be a what's the word I'm looking for? Literary. But you do literary so well, and I want to see it with these characters because I think it can. I think you can transcend the genre and it not just be a whodunit mystery. And I think you're verging on it, but you just don't give the guy a character arc, and there's no good reason not to. I think he needs one. That's what I think you ought to do with it. So yeah,
again,
that's
Wendell.
What's that?
I said hi again, Wendell.
Greetings, Wendell. Wendell
hi.
has
Welcome
returned.
back.
I wanted to reclaim my section of the screen. Like that, Brendan.
And look, I'll stop being the
I'm
center of
joking.
attention. I'll move myself back over here where I was before.
If I could just chime in real quick.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I-
Anybody want to
I-
rebut or echo or add or anything? Go ahead.
I do want to agree with Cap in that I did expect a supernatural twist,
Oh, I didn't talk about that.
especially with the way that Jay asked Tara to pull up the registry, and that was
That's not where
Was
that was
I-
going.
yeah,
That was,
that word just seemed really emphasized at that point. So I was like, okay, is this like a special registry she has to look up for like magical disappearances, or? But I guess it
was.
wasn't.
Do you understand what it is now, or
Yeah, I get that it's basically just a registry of kidnapped kids, but
well, it
or,
was
or missing persons. But
well, what I intended for that line was to be look up the sex offender registry to see if anyone moved
Oh.
into the area, but he didn't
Right.
want to say that in front of her family, so he like
Yeah. that
tried
too.
to- be
I-
vague about it. I guess.
I got that. That was not why I thought there was anything supernatural going on.
Okay.
My thing was, again, the title and the opening thing. So it's called The Girl Who Disappeared, and then we reinforced that with Tara's opening where she says, how does someone just disappear into thin air? And I took that literally. The entire story, I was expecting somebody actually disappeared in thin air, and this kid's going to figure out how that was even possible. Some of that might be the company we're keeping. Cause like you guys came from watching Geekvolution, and immediately my mind is geared toward genre stuff. I wanted to call this course literary genre fiction until I realized that was gonna kind of encumber people and force them into a box. So I didn't want to do that, but I really expected somebody to actually disappear, and it's funny looking at the look on your face because it's clear that wasn't even intentional. Because I thought maybe that was an intentional red herring, and that the reason I wasn't supposed to call the ending was because I was thinking supernatural the entire time, and that made me think that opening was a little bit of a cheat. Because I was like, well, of course I'm not thinking about this like down-to-earth, very possible explanation, because he wants me to think that somebody actually disappeared.
To play devil's advocate, and Cap just said, the company you keep. I think that's I did take it literally, but the thing about I've read a lot of Sherlock Holmes, and I always read all those stories every now and then, the ones I like every year. I wasn't feeling that vibe that much, but then I don't read too much mystery like outside of that. But there is a great book that was released, I think like 2012 or something like that, called, I'll write it in the chat. It's called The Rook by Daniel O'Malley. He's an Australian writer actually. He usually writes science fiction. It's like his first published book. It's great.
Wow.
It's kind of funny. It's really interesting. It's a great kind of mystery to it. It's more like urban fantasy, but I think you'll get a kick out of that. I think everyone, in fact, if they haven't read it already, it's an amazing first book by that author. But yeah, anyway, just wanted to throw my 2 cents in there. So
No, cool. Thanks for that recommendation. And now we all know on Skype that if you ever want to type something in your box, we'll all see it immediately. You can just be like bacon and like, bacon. This is great. Let's.
I had a feeling that was coming.
Dimitri, do you have any questions for us?
More so, well, one general question, but then more so responses than individual questions. Your response to it is kind of the most interesting, I find, because you kind of like this is the Code Spirit is kind of an introductory story, I guess. So like I was trying to deliberately start like simple and not get too like deeply into like character stuff and whatnot. That's all coming, and it's the idea was that it would start off simple and get like more complex as it goes
If
along.
this is part of a larger piece, that is fine. I didn't know that reading it, and I know that when we started, you said you were gonna make this part of like the beginning of a series, but I was thinking like a short story series, not like if this is part of what will be a complete work, and you're just like I'm gonna start with a real standard sleuth story. That's fine and possibly brilliant.
Yeah,
I got that sense actually, and I think that works. Now that
thought
you've
this-
said that, yeah.
Yeah, I thought this was going to be like a part of the collection of novellas.
I'm just glad it's not all we're getting, because that would drive me crazy.
Yeah, I don't want to like give away the next parts and whatnot, but like I think you'll enjoy the next story more if we can do this. That's more of what you were talking about. Everything that you kind of said you wanted from it. I hope the mystery part is more interesting next time. But also I wrote this story like years ago, so like I'm not entirely clean on it. This is like from a couple of years. This is a series that I come back to every now and again. So like I figured now is the time to like finish it, and I thought I would like start from the beginning with you guys. But
Interesting.
yeah, hopefully.
It's like Cap in his book.
Yeah, the difference is he looks at 2 years ago and he says years ago. I look 2 years ago and I wrote that like last Thursday. Like, how is that 2017? I don't understand.
Also, Jacob, what you said was really interesting about it not being believable. Not to peel the curtain back too much, but the story actually spawns from like a phobia that I had a couple years ago when I was like a teenager and whatnot. I, for whatever reason, got obsessed with like documentaries about like this exact thing happening. People that had like strangers living in their houses and whatnot, and that was like
Okay.
that terrified me. And I went like a year of my life just like obsessively checking everything to make sure like I was good. And then I eventually, as I was writing the story, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna reference that and try to tie that in. And then
Okay.
not saying that you're wrong. I think
Right.
that's
Right.
it's up to me to like convey it better and make it more.
That's the
Believable in
stranger
my
than
rendition of
fiction paradox, right? Where
But I just thought that was
you write a thing and nobody believes it. You're like, but it actually happened. Well, what do I have to do to convince you people? Yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah.
I wasn't saying you're wrong or anything. I just thought that was kind of interesting. That was your takeaway from it. But I will try to make that more believable. The only question that I had, which was kind of also there's other things that you said that like I can't like talk about now, but like next time I'll like refer back to this. But the only question I had really is like the general question that comes along with these things is which did any of you guys call it? Which I'm always fascinated to know.
No, I didn't. No.
No.
I was expecting a darker twist towards the end, but that might have just been me. So
Oh, and spoiler alert, I guess, but like there's never going to be any magic or supernatural or fantastical things.
I know where I stand now, so
Also, in regards to the opening passage thing that you told me to hear, did you just hello?
I'm here.
Sorry, the thing changed.
No, I'm sorry. I'm bringing up
Yes.
my other browser. Go ahead.
What was I saying? Yeah, did you just mean that you think I should get rid of that part that like, kind of misleads it, or like the whole paragraph of introduction?
So, and you did this with the other book too, and I didn't know I was looking at a book when you did it. So I would maybe have to have more of it. But like I said that with your last book too. Everything that's in there is given to us in the first 2 or 3 pages in a real natural narrative unfolding kind of way. Like I'm not sure how necessary it ultimately is. But if it's meant to be kind of, you know, a hook to give you the premise, I would maybe, okay, if it's the prologue to a larger work, I would maybe get any reference to the actual mystery of that first story out of it. and make it more of an introduction to the whole book, unless you're planning on doing that every time.
I read it as
I kind of
I read it as
Oh,
a
some-
framing. I read it as a framing device, like something Watson would do in Sherlock Holmes when he was writing his blog or whatever, writing about
Sure.
his adventures with Holmes. I just assumed that was par for the course.
Jacob knows all of my tricks, but
I mean, always take my
Get it.
comments with a grain of salt, man. Like if I throw out a criticism that you can't use and you don't like and you're just not going to, that's totally cool. I didn't think of that. I haven't read Sherlock Holmes in a very long time, but just on a standard narrative level, it didn't feel necessary to me.
see the I actually was going to do it every time, but like it's kind of I'm not entirely. The reason that I decided to try to do something like that is like on the off chance that someone sees one of them like out of context, like if it in a, used to contact a magazine and try to get published and whatnot. Like yeah, the idea, or if it's like online or whatever on a website, the idea was that if someone were to stumble upon one like out of sequence, they could get like a little thing that catches them up on what's going on pretty much, and then like in case they had short attention spans, to give them a teaser of what the
I'm
actual
happy to hear that
thing
because
of
I
the-
wrote.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I just didn't know the context of it.
but like
Yeah,
I'm not sure if that's I'm still not sure if that actually works, if that's like a good idea, because like
Yeah,
if you
that-
are
that-
reading it if you are reading it sequentially like the way it was intended, then it is kind of unnecessary. So I'm at a crossroads of where I don't really know
Yeah,
how
it's
to
tough.
do that.
Yeah, to help you with that, the last comment in my notes was please send this to a magazine to get it published because yeah, I'll be annoyed if you don't, and you don't want to see me annoyed.
Yeah.
So
It's like a dimmed down version of the Hulk. You don't want to see me mildly upset.
And he's wearing green, of course.
It could be a thing that you can use depending on where it is, right? So like if you had it online, you could use it, but if it's in a book, you could take it out, you know. Depending on what you decided you wanted to do with it.
And are you're firmly against the premonition of the mysteries? And then I figured that would be like the teaser, but like if you think it works better with it out, I don't really have a valid counter argument to that.
Just the way just without the context of a larger piece, that's how I felt about it when I read it.
I mean, even in a larger piece, like you're still reading the Cliff Notes version of the question that you're gonna read later. So like I guess those thoughts are still valid.
Okay.
Again, my biggest issue is that it led me down the wrong path and I wasn't paying attention to details I should have been paying attention to because I thought there was teleportation. But then I had to wait I had to wait for Brendan's story before there was teleportation, and then it wasn't actually teleportation. I didn't get teleportation. I just really, for whatever reason, I guess, wanted teleportation this week. No, I'm kidding. But anyway, yeah, that's how I felt about it when I read it. But you're intentionally doing a Sherlock Holmes thing with it, so I don't know. Like,
I guess when you get to the next one, if your opinion still stands, I guess. Also, like I completely did not intend the supernatural reading of it, so like I don't even know how to properly like fix that. I guess I'll just not. I don't know. That never occurred to me that people would interpret it that way. I'm kind of interested in that.
well, it sounds like two of us did, so it would be interesting to
Yeah,
get a
so, like,
larger sample set and see if that keeps happening. Because if it's 50%, you want to do something about that.
Yeah.
If that's not your intent and you don't want to, because I think if that's intentional, I think it's a cheat. I think it's like, make everybody think it's supernatural. Nope, it's not. It's just a dude in the, I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. So like, thanks for pointing that out. I probably will like try to make that clearer.
That's probably why I was harder on it than anybody else was. Because I was like, oh man, that's not fair. You're not playing fair with the audience. And he's like, what are you talking about?
Wouldn't it be more of a rip-off the other way though? Like if you went the whole time thinking it was like some logical explanation for it, and at the end it's just like, well, it's magic. Like
Yes,
what does
both
that
are
have-
problems. But like, yeah, because that was always my issue with the Prestige. I got to the end of that and I was like, well, you weren't playing fair with the audience. Really? There's a machine? Okay. But people love that movie and stand by it, so what do I know? Okay, let's go ahead and move on if we can to Brendan's story. It's Dark Reflection. And Brendan, I've been jumping ahead with everybody's story. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump ahead with yours.
Okay.
Wait. While you my laptop is like dying, so I'm gonna get a charger while you read that, so, like, just so you know that I'm not like just leaving. I'll be right back.
Okay,
Okay.
cool. Dimitri's pissed. He's done.
Ah,
All right,
you
Dimitri,
criticized my story.
Temper, guys.
Oh man. Hey, Brendan, I want you to say that every time somebody leaves. like every time somebody actually drops out or they get up and leave, I just want Brendan to go, "You criticize my story." It's every time, just like that. I'm gonna take that soundbite and do something with it. That's okay. So I'm gonna start the interrogation room because I want to read all the dialogue. That's my plan. Okay, you guys ready? Here we go.
Ready.
So we are like halfway, no, not even, like page 5, like way past that. But I'm going to start the interrogation room. I was brought into an interrogation room. I was questioned by 2 men. One was tall. He sat across from me at the table. He wore a black suit with a white shirt. The other guy stood in the corner, leaned up against the wall. He wore the same as the other guy. The guy across from me asked the questions. So who are you? Sir, you have no ID, and from what we can tell, no record of deplorable activities. Well, that's good. I don't know what the problem is. There's no record of deplorable activities. My name is Edward Walker. I live in Canberra. The 2 men looked at me with a confused look on their faces. Where is that, sir? You're kidding, right? I don't joke, sir. It's the capital of Australia. No, sir, that would be Empire City. What? It has been since the founding of the Australasia Empire in 1919. What? These kids today don't know their own history. The police then got up and left. At that moment, I realized the transporter had not sent me to another place, but had sent me to another universe. I had been left alone for a while when the police came in with someone else. We need your DNA. For what? It is the quickest way to figure out who you are and where you belong. I knew where I belonged. It wasn't on this earth, but I had no idea how to get back. I spat in a cup on the table and handed it off to them. Thank you, sir. We shall be back to take you where you need to go. Not too long later, 2 heavily armed men came into the room dressed all in red with the South Cross printed on their shoulder. They grabbed me, threw a bag on my head. I felt a pinch on my something. We just don't have a noun there. Next thing I knew, I was sitting in a much larger room in front of me. A man with a big red helmet but no visor and something that resembled a crown on the top, but it was one solid covering. He was sitting in a gold throne like a king. On either side of him were men in black business suits with black shirts and black ties. I looked over both my shoulders and saw the men that had obviously brought me there. Good job, gentlemen, retrieving this man so quickly, the red helmet man said as he got up from his throne to leave us. Yes, my emperor. The guy that brought me quickly turned in military fashion and left. Well, you must be confused, mustn't you? What do you mean? Well, in place that seems so similar but at the same time so different. You know, I'm from a different Earth. Of course I do. You see? He lifted up his helmet. I'm you! I tell you, it's like looking into a mirror, but not. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about this story, and we will begin with the last author, who was Dimitri.
Well, let's see. I wrote a couple things down, but they're kind of like barely contextualized and like kind of out of order, so I might like ramble and jump around. But
No worries.
the first thing I said was that it could use a smoother transition from dialogue to flashback. I'm not entirely sure what I meant there, but like from
Yeah, I think I get it.
from like the time the like little intro thing from when he's like talking to a person telling him what happened, and then like they're just like in a flashback. I didn't realize that things, probably because the indentation wasn't there, but I didn't realize that we were like in a different place now and different things were happening. I was kind of thrown off by that. I enjoyed the general plot and whatnot. I liked how it seemed like there was a couple of different genres spilling onto each other. Even though, at least when I read it, it wasn't like entirely finished, so I didn't like know exactly where it was going. But I liked the idea of it that I started with. I thought I said info dump narration exposition. So there's a lot of it where it seems like you're just trying to communicate a lot of information at once to the audience or readers or whatever, and it seems like you could have. I wish I had like a specific example, but it seems like when we first go back in time and when he's like talking about telling you the situation with his parents and whatnot and his mom and the welfare checks and whatnot, it seems like a lot of stuff is just being said plainly, and I feel like that can come into his dialogue more concisely. There were a couple spelling and grammar errors which I try not to focus on whatnot, but like the one that I felt compelled to write was that you alternated between different spellings of the Eddie.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's understandable. Yeah. It's all right.
Minor complaint, but I felt the need to point it out.
No, fair enough.
I think-
You criticize my story.
I think that whole section at the beginning of the flashback, that's the part where it was most like the expository narrations. I said that you could have kind of just started with him reading the letter and then worked backwards and like give context what it is as he's reading it or when he's done, but with his reaction. I also think the letter could be a little bit more, what she writes could be a little bit more like emotional. She's kind of like bluntly stated that I should have wrote like specific examples of things, so I'm kind of going off memory.
That's all right.
The teleportation device was really, or the matter transportation. I was interested in that, but like my only thing is that was kind of introduced very, very unceremoniously, where he's like sad that he got the letter and whatnot, and then he's like, "Oh, your friend's here," and he's like, "Okay, well." Then he went to my teleportation device, and I'm like, "Where did that come from? How are we now here?" Which leads me to, I think, just the biggest complaint thing that I had. I wrote, "I was sucked into the gateway, ellipsis, come on now," because of like, that was a very unceremonious description of someone being sucked into a vortex. Like there's a giant rippling vortex in the fabric of reality, and he's like pulled through it, and he just said, "I was sucked into the gateway." Like there's no, is stuff flying around? Is he holding on to something, trying to like cling to it? What's his thought process? Is he scared? How does it feel? Is it tingle skin or something like that? It was just very like, there could be more description toward that action. And then,
And if he knew it was going to take him to an alternate universe, you could almost get away with the explanation of, "Well, I invented it. I knew exactly what would happen." Except you didn't. So.
No.
that scene could be like that action could be like 3 paragraphs, and it was just like one sentence that was stuck into the gateway, and I'm like, okay, that was
Yeah,
the end of that. But from there, from when he wakes up on the street, face down, apparently, I thought it was pretty. That was kind of the end of my complaints. I think from there it was pretty thoroughly compelling. I was interested to see how it unfolded and what was happening. I didn't end up calling it. I thought they were like, he was in a different time period or whatever. Like I thought it was just time travel, but I didn't occur to the dimensional travel thing. I guess it was really Doctor Who, which I was thinking time travel. I guess I don't know. But from that point onward, I thought the story was shaping up. It was moving at a nice pace, and like things were happening back to back, and I was invested in what was going on. And then like just kind of stopped. But
yeah, I had to get something posted. That's why.
I know you guys have been like really quiet as I was doing that, so I don't know if that made any sense at all. But,
Yeah, absolutely.
No,
We're just giving you the floor because the floor was yours, Dimitri.
Yeah.
because I was real quick because I like left to get something and then came back and you finished. So like in my mind I was like, I hope I'm not reading the wrong person's notes. And I thought you just like weren't correcting me until I was done.
Oh man, that would have been really funny. And then Wendell was like, "Nothing you said has anything to do with my story."
Because everyone was just so quiet. I'm like, am I doing this?
When you said, Brennan, couldn't the letter have had like a little more like emotion in it? Like, I I immediately flashed back to the Back to the Future 3. And I was thinking like, I love you, and I don't want to see you anymore. Let's hear from Jacob.
So, I'd like to start by saying that I am interested in alternate dimension stuff, particularly with like an evil clone, I guess the phrase would be here, or like the evil or the evil twin, I guess.
Yeah, doppelganger. Yeah.
Yeah, the doppelganger. I would parrot a lot of what Dimitri said in regards that I can't get into Eddie's head, and that I feel like Lana should be fleshed out a little bit if you're going to include her at all, and not just start with him reading the letter. And the super science really comes out of nowhere for me, so I feel that should be established earlier.
Yeah.
And I feel you have the opposite problem that I have with your pacing. I think you need to slow down a little bit. So I don't really have a lot of narrowed down, focused critiques for you, just more general stuff, I guess.
Go ahead, Wendell.
Yeah, I'm dying to talk because I mean, when it's just I had like some complete opposite reactions to what Dimitri and Jacob just said. So yeah, let's start with the one page I wrote of awesome things. I won't read a page, but the hooks kept on coming. It was like you were like, oh, you like that, did you? What about this? You know, and so I never expected what was coming, and I was always pleasantly surprised. Like it didn't lose me at any moment. So I had no trouble with pacing, but that's not to disagree with what Jacob said. Maybe you could slow down a little bit, but I personally like really fast pacing in stories. The tech is great. The matter transportation device, as you called it. I don't know if this was intended, but I feel like it's there in subtext, and that's the fact that it would make absolute sense that Eddie would build something to cross long distances, considering the breakdown of his relationship with Lana. And suddenly, with the invention of that, you know, just the possibilities of ideas of where this story could go just expanded a huge amount, and it came just at the right point in the story. So kudos on that. Kind of my not so good.
Dimitri looks like he's dying to say something.
Yeah.
You just blew my mind with that. That just like connected everything in a way that I wasn't thinking about. Like, not to rewrite your story, Brendan, but like, if you like make that the reason that he starts working on it in the first place, like somehow like make her the motivation behind that would be.
That was my note as well. Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to like.
Because the way it is right now, I don't mean to interrupt either, but I'm sorry, Wendell, I'm going to. The way it is right now, there's a complete disconnect where it reads like just, well, we gotta have some kind of background for this guy, and it's weird because it's not a flashback. It happens immediately before he goes in the portal, and like maybe we can flesh that out later. But with just what we have right now, it's like two completely disconnected things. Where it's like, why do I even need to know about his girlfriend problems when immediately after the big crux of the story, like the premise of the story is I'm in a whole other universe. Like maybe we'll meet her there or something. Like maybe that's a setup, but it would be nice if those two things were. If we had a personal motivation because he's in a bad place mentally when he goes, but it doesn't have anything to do with why he's there.
There we go. I feel like we're spoiling something that maybe Brendan has planned because, especially
maybe so.
And I don't want to give you suggestions. There's a lot of suggestions I have, but I don't want to give you any suggestions because I want you to keep surprising me with this awesome story. But yeah, I think they're right with those points. I'm glad you both interrupted because that's, if you could build up that reason of why he built that around Lana, that would be great. And then if you could meet this parallel universe Lana, that'd be awesome. My not so good thing, I kind of need to preface this first with another good thing. So, because when you cut to the past, like I really believe that Eddie was 16, especially in the middle of the story. Like I really feel like I'm in his head. Like there's a lot of great lines that helped with that. Like she got in the car and left my life forever. That's very melodramatic, and that's what I would have said at 16, and probably did. So, but you're doing a few things there just with that one line. You're being as melodramatic as a 16-year-old would be. You're explaining what Lana's doing, and you're doing it through Eddie's lens. You know how he would see the situation. So my not so good thing, because I latched onto that, like I felt like in contrast to what Dimitri said, I felt like I fell out of Eddie's head a little bit when he meets with his friend and gets sucked into the gateway. Because, I mean, I know he's entered the unfamiliar, and so I just feel like I lost the character a little bit, because he goes from cursing and throwing stuff around his room and bursting into tears straight to the next hook with the portal. And so I think for the sake of exposition, I feel like I lose him a little bit there, especially when he discovers he's talking to the other version of himself. Like the Emperor was informing the history of this new world to Eddie, but I felt Eddie would have more questions for the Emperor than the other way around. And I don't think it lacks cohesion, because it's got a nice flow for me all the way through, and it's really important that there is some contrast there, because these are two different worlds. But I was maybe lacking like a through line with his character, and yeah, I'm trying and failing to explain myself, so I hope that makes sense in some way.
Yeah, I just need. I'll be honest. I needed to let everyone know what was the big. I wanted there to be a big difference between these two two Earths, and I needed to explain everything in there, and I don't think I did it that well. But I knew I was dumping a whole lot of information on everyone there, and I just wanted
No,
to get
dump
through
away.
it.
It was great.
Here's the thing, though. Let me interject and say I think you can do both things simultaneously, and I'm going to echo Jacob and just say you just got to slow yourself down a little bit. I also think that you can play to your strengths and slow yourself down. Wendell, I don't know if you'd agree with this. I think there is, because you seem to like the pacing of this more than some other folks. I like the like, what's the word I used in my notes? Because I'm losing it all of a sudden. It's real. The prose is minimalistic. It's really minimalistic prose. Like, it is, and Brendan's always written that way, and I think you can really play it to a strength. Like, early on, the first thing we got from Brendan read like it was a film script, or I guess the second thing read a little bit more like a film script, and the first thing read like a pitch, and this reads like it's finally morphing into real prose where I'm being allowed to use my imagination and work with it some too. So I mean, like, you've improved a ton every time you put something out, Brendan, but I think you can let that minimalism work for you. I think the really clipped sentences that give you like very simple bits of information that's like somewhat sparse on detail, as long as every detail you're giving us is really important and necessary, I think you can really use that to your advantage. But I also think that is a style before it should be a crutch, of course. So you can write that way, but there are still some places where you're gonna have to slow yourself down a little bit and give us details we really need, right? So I think the frustration that a couple of us are having with the scene where we meet the Emperor is I'm not learning anything about your protagonist when I'm looking at his doppelganger, and I ought to. Like, it shouldn't be just as superficial of a contrast as he's the ruler and I'm just a kid that built a teleporter. Like, I think while you're giving us that exposition of what exactly happened in this other universe, and I mean, all the stuff with Australasia and everything is really interesting, and it's a really fun, might I say, spin on the, like, what if Hitler won the war thing, because we never get that from Australia's perspective, and it's fun kind of putting Australia at the center, and they've kind of taken over, and like that's fun, and I want more of that. But I think you can do both simultaneously, and I think the main thing you've got to do is sometimes between lines I really appreciate that you're not using dialogue tags. I really appreciate that you're as minimalistic with your dialogue as you are. But occasionally, stop that flow of dialogue and let characters do stuff. And through stuff they're doing, we're going to learn more about them. Get some action in there. I don't mean guns blazing. I mean subtle action stuff. What are people doing while they're talking? People tend to use their hands and do stuff while they're having a conversation, and I think that is a simple mechanic that you need to employ in order to make both of those things happen at the same time.
And I'm afraid that I came off as a little harsh in my feedback, so I just wanted to apologize for that.
No. No one was too harsh.
We don't. No need to apologize, buddy.
Yeah,
you criticize my story.
I don't like the way Wendell said that, where he was like, I'm like the opposite of Dimitri and Jacob. I thought it was us. I'm like, that's not.
Sorry, yeah. I didn't mean to put words in your mouth.
Sorry if I made it seem like that. Like, no, I as I said, I was really interested in it and the actual narrative and whatnot. But my only issues were that with the mechanics and the way of prose and just like not being as expressive as you could with telling it, but the actual story there, I think is fine. I do agree with Wendell though about the point he made about the two things being connected. I've just been thinking about that this whole time, and that just makes more and more sense because he's also like 16, and that's like a thing an immature child would do with that level of like.
Yeah, I did try to establish that he was like a genius at the beginning of the story. I just I obviously didn't do enough to tell you what he was doing with that genius and why he was doing the things he was doing. I really wanted to get a reason why he is trying to establish who he is, and things kind of changed between each writing session for this. There was different motivations in mind, so that's why I think it came off as clunky and at times as it did. But that when I really wanted to get to that Emperor scene right at the end, I wanted to leave off with that for this thing. I wanted to kind of show you where I was going and that, but yeah, I shouldn't have rushed as much as I did to get to that bit. I really should have taken some time with that.
So
it is the first draft.
Yeah, exactly. Brendan, I'll give you the floor some more after we finish. But I would suggest, first of all, it's difficult when you're writing for a workshop, like when you kind of know that there's this like small audience, and you're like, well, if I just write a first chapter, because I don't know how long you're planning on making this. I don't know if this is a book. I don't know if this is a novella. I don't know what this is. Do you know what this is? Do you know how long you're planning on going? Or I'll go ahead and ask you that question.
Well, originally it was going to be that short story, but like, I realized quite.
Oh, you were going to make it the superhero origin story. Okay, cool.
Yeah. But there's just way too much that's got to be put in there, and
no, this sounds like a book. Now it could be a novella. It could even be short story length, depending on especially what you're doing with that relationship stuff. Because if that's at the forefront of it, then just getting like a couple of pages of and Australia took over after the war might be all we need. Like he might meet her in this other universe and learn something about himself and have an opportunity for change, and then wind up back in his universe. There is maybe a 20-page short story there. This reads like the beginning of something grander than that, but that doesn't necessarily mean it is. That's just how it read to us. But what I was going to say is, it really, from what you just said, it sounds like maybe you were like, well, I got to hurry up and cut to the chase, and I don't have time to write more than 7 or 8 pages, and I don't want these guys to not know what the premise of the story is. So I got to hurry up and get to that. I think, Brendan, there are a couple of different directions to go with this. I think in revising the beginning of this, I think you could either, as it sounds like you're suggesting based on some of our notes, go back and give us a sense right away of what it is the guy's actually working on. I think another thing, and I suggested this in my notes. I think another direction to go with this, it would be a tonal shift. It would change the tone you've got right now. You could go from a more kind of like, I don't know if quirky is the right word, but you could go from a perspective of the absent-minded inventor kid, right? And you can and you could get us to exactly what you have right now through this kid being eccentric and absent-minded and having kind of like his mind's a cluster, and you could make it really amusing. You could have a little bit perhaps more of like a comedic bent to it, where he's giving us all that drama at the beginning, because you were talking earlier about how you want this to be like a 16-year-old kid that hasn't really found himself yet, right? And it could be kind of fun if you had this kid like giving us all the melodrama about his girlfriend and his plight there, and he's like, oh right, I forgot to mention I built the teleporter. And like if you do that from the kid's perspective, that could be really fun. Like if you make it jarring on purpose like that, that could be great, I think. But I think that's the only way to do it and keep it where and keep that reveal where it is right now. But that would be a way to keep that reveal exactly where it is, and then inject that kid with some more personality. And I think it would be a lot of, this might not be, and I'm not trying to rewrite your story, because this might not be the tone you want. So if it's not, forget everything I'm saying. But how much fun would it be for that absent-minded kid that can't keep his thoughts straight and jumps from thing to thing to thing, and maybe that's even the reason that he can't keep his relationship together, meets himself in another world and he's the emperor, and it's like that much of a contrast? That sounds like a lot of fun to me. It's just food for thought, but that's the direction you could go with it.
It's an interesting idea. I might take some elements of that, but yeah, there is. This is there's a going to be a different I don't think I've made the contrast clear to where he's at the beginning of the story, where he's going to beat his psychologist.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I didn't have a great sense of him, and at the beginning, I wasn't sure what the whole psychologist thing was even about. I wasn't totally sure why he was there.
You're not really supposed to.
Okay, that's cool.
Really supposed to yet. There's quite a bit, because you got where he was going was going to be a lot darker, and when I initially started, but then I was actually watching The Man in the High Castle, and all this just came thundering out of this story, and I was like, oh, that's. So I kind of did my version of that world sort of thing. But yeah, that's where I got this sort of thing started popping into my head. So yeah, originally it was going to be a lot darker and everything, but things changed, and
yeah, I really sense that when you like I realized you said I had to get something posted, and that's why, like, that makes sense, and in saying like struggling with motivations, I can sense that. And I think to mine and Dimitri's point, when you when you finally figure out what that is, whether it's more about Lana or it's more about the things you've just been mentioning, like the flow of it, all those problems you were mentioning before will work perfectly. So
this is just the very first draft, so I'm not worried about.
And it's a great one. Yeah, don't worry at all.
And guys, as always, and Brendan, I don't mean to cut you off or sound rude or anything, but I don't want to spend a lot of time explaining the piece. Okay, like we want the piece to stand on its own. We give you our thoughts about it, and then you take what you want to and leave everything else on the table. But does I've got to move on, and I don't want to shaft Wendell. So, does anybody else have anything else they're just burning that they've got to throw out for Brendan? I mentioned a couple big things. Brendan, I've got plenty of notes. Well, let me mention real quick. One of the big things, just mechanically, watch the run-ons, man. Like just read it out loud if you need to, and find the places where you need sentence breaks, because periods and commas are your friends. And they're free, and you should use them. They're important. Anyway, anybody else have anything that you really want to say? And then we'll let Brendan ask any questions if he's got any.
Yeah, let me shaft myself.
No!
Were we?
No
It's funny to say
self-shafting!
those
Sorry, go
lines.
ahead. Winnow. Yeah, I know, and then I made it worse. I made it weirder. Yeah, go ahead.
Brendan, were we going anywhere with the reference to the 50s? I didn't know if I was missing something. Is that something common in Australia in the early 2000s, or it was just like a
That
feature of
was
the story?
just the I really wanted to illustrate that he was like the I'm trying to remember that teacher was like stuck there, and that I just wanted something quirky for them to have. I don't know if that's going that's going anywhere. It's just something that popped in my head when I was writing that bit.
It's cool. I like it. Keep it. Yeah. And I like it. Has like a touch of H.G. Wells about it at the beginning. Like, well, Doctor, I will tell you, but you're gonna have to believe in the fantastic. I really like that line.
Sure.
Yeah.
I question that this is real minor, Brendan, and again, take this or leave this, and there are probably a lot of other things that use this, but I question the terminology of this guy. I mean, I know that he's a scientist, but he didn't know this was going to happen. He's got like the fan four stick thing where like he builds the device that he thinks is going to be a teleporter, and then it ends up being an interdimensional thing. He keeps calling it like another Earth, which is like the DC Flash terminology, and I don't know if everybody would immediately go to other Earth before they go to like alternate dimension or parallel universe or. So I kind of question that. That seemed like maybe it just came from your comics guy, so you called it another Earth. But I don't know if everybody would immediately go to that.
I didn't really have a problem with that, but I'm not really into comics, so
Not a lot of places outside of DC universe that uses that terminology. That's the only reason I brought it
Well,
up.
I kind of interpreted it because like it wasn't like so foreign. It was kind of Earth-like in and of itself. So I made that connection on my own. But like I wasn't like I am a DC person, so like I probably was just thinking about it like you were. So like I don't know if my point is valid. That
Well, that's the whole reason I mentioned it. Is it seems like a real specific way of describing that I don't know if everybody would go to, but it's not important. I just thought I'd bring it up. Okay, is everybody ready to move on, or does anybody? Brendan, do you have any questions for us?
No, not this time around.
All right, let's go to the travelogue of Jet Silversky, and I'm gonna go past all the prologue stuff, but I am gonna start just at chapter one. I'm gonna pass all the prologue stuff, even though it's fun and would be fun to read out loud. There's a line toward the beginning that says I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to intentionally get ahead of myself. Okay, so chapter one of Wendell's story, and I'm going to read a couple of pages. Here we go. Welcome! We've been expecting you! I screamed. That's not how the simulator had taught me to react upon encounter with a new species, but I never expected my first contact would be with someone with the same face as mine, let alone in flawless English. Who are you, and why are you wearing my face? I checked my own to see if it had been taken. It hadn't, though I felt blood trickling from my thumping head. Krulash almighty! I didn't get sucked into a parallel universe, did I? Did I? The last thing I remembered was our ship losing control of navigation. We'd clearly crashed, but the ship was nowhere in sight. I resisted the urge to get up and run, an ability in which I would become proficient with the passage of time. Land, check. Communicate, check. 2 out of 3 tasks completed, and given the non-existent language barrier, 2 out of 3 academy semesters wasted. My colleagues had said I wouldn't make it off of Javenba. Well, I'd crashed and screamed. I wasn't proud of either, but I'd barely done anything and yet achieved so much. I wondered how the other 6 communicators were faring. They call me Spit, said the alien with my face, recapturing my attention. He leaned in close with a smile that reminded me why I didn't. Is that really what people saw when they spoke to me? No wonder my insurance had been so high. Your face arrived the same time you did, he added, tapping his left temple and sending a brilliant white flash rippling through the head mask before it returned to my face. For clarification calmed my nerves a little. tech was more advanced than anything on Javinba. His smile was replaced by an open mouth and raised eyebrows, which then knitted themselves as the nose scrunched. I'd come to learn he was trying to master human facial expressions for the first time. The speed at which he changed expressions made him look like a camel chewing licorice like its life depended on it. Entertainment sent from Earth had been lacking of late, but what little came through the relays provided more similes for our colony. From Spit's long neck down came the differences. His skin was gray, smooth, and shined in the fading light of the planet's sun. Well-built arms reached down to his knees. A naked body, as far as I could tell, with as much well-defined musculature as my own, minus the large fatty deposit around the middle that had accumulated thanks to many long nights in the college bar. He studied me too. I was reminded of my father, then remembered my manners. Nice to meet you, Spit. I'm Jet Silversky. I proffered a hand, which he grasped like a vice, a tighter grip than the one offered. So he had some familiarity with human greetings. I was happy to see his hand remained his own, or rather, not mine. Introductions out of the way, it was time to get my bearings. To my left, a giant water sculpture rotated its two flaming mirrored balls. Soft dissonant tones emanated from between them. Kinetic and phallic could describe most things I'd encounter on the planet. Let's begin with our last author, and that would be Mr. Stewart. Mr. Stewart.
Yeah, this was quite enjoyable. I liked how you threw me right into the new this world, and I didn't have a lot of information straight off, but I felt like okay, we're going straight into this. We're not gonna hold your hand or anything through it. So, but you did quite enough to guide me through it, which I enjoyed. I just wish I had time to read more of this, because it seems really intriguing, and it obviously from the prologue it doesn't end all that well. So I'm intrigued to find out where this is all going. So I'm definitely going to duck back and read more of this afterward.
And Brennan, I think you'll love the ending of this. It's got a great cliffhanger. Let's go to Jacob.
So I'd like to start by saying that your descriptions are excellent, especially in the prologue. It read a lot like a journal entry, and that was a lot of fun to read. I've not really encountered that in any of the books I've read. And the thing that sticks out to me the most is that it seems a little odd that such an advanced alien species wouldn't really grasp the concept of different solar systems and different suns, to the point where they treat that like a religion or something. But I don't really delve that much into sci-fi, so I don't know if that's just me.
Jacob, what else you got, man? You got any broader notes?
I don't know if I personally like the name Jet Silversky. It just seems a little forced, I guess. A little bit like a kid trying to come up with like a super cool name that doesn't really work when you think about it. But I don't know if that's just me or not. And I'm not trying to be mean or anything. It's just I don't know. It's just a name that doesn't.
No, Jacob, I'll say I question it a little bit too. It's real pulpy throwback, and I don't know if the piece is really that, right? Like, it's got a lot of stuff in common with something like John Carter, but it doesn't strike me as like is like pulp serially, really. Yeah. It's not really like a Sky Captain kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Jacob, please be as mean as you want. You don't get to look like this without being roasted constantly. It's okay.
Okay.
Wendell, you got the right attitude. I really hope you come back, buddy.
But yeah, that's about all I've got. The name and the aliens in the sun, I guess.
Dimitri?
Well, I had quite a fun time going through it. It reminded me kind of, as Cap said, like about that pulp kind of style. I was thinking, this is probably going to sound like not what you're going for, but I was thinking of Flash Gordon a little
Oh, see,
bit.
that's really interesting because I
Um,
wasn't. I feel like that's the name he goes with, but that's not the story he's telling. Interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it was mostly because like the way the intro and like the foreboding thing. But I have more specific notes. Um, I do like the introduction, but like it was a little tonally confused. It was like the beginning is like very foreboding and like people are dying and like it sets up like a lot of questions about that, and then like it becomes sort of comedic after that. And I wasn't sure if I interpreted that wrong or like if I'm just not following along. Um, I assume it was intended to be like fairly comedic throughout. So um, the first thing I have is very nitpicky, but it's just a thing that I couldn't help but think of when the reason that France doesn't send help is because they're afraid of like the contagion and whatnot. And I'm like, don't like now we have in order to little NASA lesson, but in order to send things to space stations, we have autopiloted rockets that have like capsules and parts that break off, and then when they get to the place, it's just like a little box. So like this far in the future, they couldn't come up with any like means of autopiloting things to where they don't have to physically be there. Like that was just a thing that I couldn't help but like question.
Well, that's a good point. I didn't think of that.
Neither did I.
I'm very into like astronomy and things like that, so that like immediately jumped out at me. Um,
I'll come to you for research.
I can't promise everything will be accurate.
It'll be a
I
co-working
wrote-
piece.
I'm not entirely sure what I meant by this, but I wrote Spitz should explain his motives of learning human expression himself. I assuming that there was something about him that was said in like narration, and I feel like he should have like Spit himself or expressed that. I'm not entirely sure. I'd read this like a couple days ago, so I'm not entirely sure what I meant by that, but take that as you will. Mild tonal inconsistency, blah blah blah. I found it a little bit hard to gauge Jet's personality, so to speak. He seems very formal and kind of timid and passive, but then some like he makes a lot of jokes in his inner monologue and whatnot. And he's like has a sort of sense of humor in his head that doesn't really manifest itself outwardly, but that could be intentional. But it's just an observation. Another like dumb nitpicky thing. My exact words here were language pills dash. I'm a biologist, but I'm pretty sure this is not entirely how that works. Because like the explanation that you gave was like it teaches like his tongue to move like in the way of the language. And like there's more to languages than tongue. Again, this is not based on anything. It's just that occurred to me like that as I was reading it. Feel free to do with that what you will.
No, Wendell, a big question I'm hearing, and I have this, I guess, a little bit too, is how hard sci-fi is this? And like, because and I think for the most part it works really well, but you're blending something like kind of more quirky and out there and more about like playing with language and stuff like that Douglas Adams is, with like almost like Arthur C. Clarke level science. So I think the reason, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Dimitri, but I think part of the reason Dimitri's going to those places is because a lot of the science feels like it's like it's right, like it's above board, and then you get things like that where it's like, well, that sounds a little like whimsical, and it is kind of a whimsical story, and so there's this real difficult line that you're walking between whimsy and accurate science. The language pills is like the more hard sci-fi version of the Babelfish.
It reminds me of the milk from John Carter. That lets him speak the Martian language.
Yeah, I'm not entirely opposed to like the pill doing that. Just the explanation of it was kind of like, I don't know if that's the way that would work, but do with that what you will. I had a few more things. The dialogue, they talk in a very formal way, which is probably a deliberate thing, especially considering like their occupation and the fact that it takes place so far in the future.
It's just because I'm British. Don't worry. Yeah. It's
um, my only problem with formality in a lot of writing is that it kind of begins to make all the people sound the same, and it kind of blends together the dialogue, and I can't really. But I had that a little bit here with the two. I think.
Wendell, don't be
Jack
offended. What he's
Spade.
saying is British people all sound the same. That's what he's saying.
No, this is fantastic because that's a problem I have with all of my characters. They all sound like my own head. So these are amazing notes. They're really good. Thank you.
I have always struggled with that.
Yeah, I think Jet and Spit, the way like their ways of speaking could be like a little, because it seems like you want them to be portrayed as like opposites almost, and like they don't really get along. And like at the beginning of their conversation, I couldn't really tell that. It seemed like they were the same type of person interacting, and then like the more it went on, the more Spit fell into his own personality, and he was like a little bit more crude. And I wrote that he was talking really proper and professionally while doing very unprofessional things, which I don't know if you want to look to find the humor in that and expand on that more, or if that was completely unintentional. I don't know, interpret that how you will, but like he's speaking in a very formal way while like sticking his finger up someone's nose. Like I don't know if maybe something you want to do. But again, I mostly like I'm a fan of like space things and sci-fi things, so I was on board with it. I really like the way. I can never really get a firm grasp on what was going to happen, and I do like the way that they kind of ended up having to be stuck together. And
Yeah, I
like
didn't expect that at all. I didn't realize you were setting up a supporting character there. I thought he was going to be gone by the end of this.
Yeah, to turn into like a kind of a buddy cop thing, which is where I assume you're going. I love.
And then the question is he going to be stuck with his face the whole time? Like, is it going to be these two guys with the same face the entire novel?
I love the dismissiveness of the guy where he's like, he points like the rest of his body. He's like, "Does this look human to you?" And he's like, I don't know, same thing. And he just doesn't give it.
Yeah, that was really funny.
The only part that I would say like I strongly didn't really care for was running the running joke of like him of like the alien words and whatnot, and like specifically I wrote the Crew Lashes insert obscene body part here running thing kind of got old quickly. It reminds me of I don't know if any of you guys watched Teen Titans, the cartoon. It reminds me of that, where when Starfire would be like a running thing, where Starfire would be like, she'd say some like alien thing, and the joke would be like, "Oh, you don't know what that word means," and like that sense of humor is kind of like never really appealed to me specifically. But that just might be a personal preference thing. But other than that, that's my only real complaint that I would recommend changing.
That's a personal preference thing with me also, but it's also a weird idea that culturally it would evolve that way, because usually you just get something like Odin's beard where like you land on one and then everybody always says that, and with this it's like does their whole culture just say like Crew Lashes like left toe, or like every 5 minutes you come up with another one? Like, is that cultural, or is that just a thing Jet does? I wasn't sure about that.
I really want to answer, but I'm not gonna.
yeah, thanks, man. Okay, Dimitri, did you have anything else?
My phone's dying, so like I can't get to my notes, but that's basically it. I hit all the major points.
Okay, thanks, man. Good notes. Does anybody else have anything they want to mention before I go down mine? Because I have quite a few things.
No.
Okay, I'm gonna go through some more specific stuff, because a lot of what I loved about this was technical. And well, I mean, I enjoyed the story a lot, but you've got such a great command of language that was wonderful and hit me sideways in a lot of places, and I want to bring some of that up. First of all, this is a really good first line. We didn't mean for them all to die. How do you not keep reading after that? That's a great first line. My my big major first tenet of writing, as you guys have heard me say 1,000 times, is nobody cares about your story. And you seem to have a really good grasp of that rule, because I read that and I immediately want to keep going. I really like the unreliable narrator disclaimer. There's a disclaimer at the beginning that's like, I'm gonna embellish and stuff, and like I don't have to, but I'm probably gonna do that. And so like you're gonna read the whole book not being sure if everything you're reading is exactly the way it happened. And I thought it was kind of fun that it comes right out and says, yeah, it's an unreliable narrator. I like that infantile amnesia is common in my species. That is not only just an amusing gag, but it also is giving you some potential information for this world. That's the first point, I think, that we get the sense that there are other species at all, and gives you a sense of the quirkiness of the piece. From the very beginning, we know that we're looking at something that's kind of quirky, and yeah, it gets dire and it gets dark, but that's blended with comedy, and there's a lot of and Dimitri, I guess I thought some of that was blended better than you did, because a lot of it read to me as like comedy that like keeps this character going through like real dire adverse times where like everything sucks, but he kind of finds the humor in it. And also I should mention that I was very much at home here, because this is very, very British humor, which I grew up with quite a bit, and not as much as a guy who probably grew up in England, but I read Adams, and I watched Blackadder, and there's a lot of that stuff in this that I latched onto real quick. So this is not going to be for every audience either. This is a pretty niche kind of piece, and I just happen to fall into the niche that kind of gets what he's doing with this. So yeah, I don't know that this is necessarily for everybody. Matter of fact, dry humor. And it's consistent, and it's always pretty funny. I read this line while I was reading. I checked my own face to see if it had been taken. It hadn't. It's great. There are a lot of bits like that I didn't pick up on a first read, and I read everything twice for this group, and I'm glad I did, because there's nuggets like that jumped out at me on a second read. And I think pieces like this insist on a second read, which may or may not be a problem, but I don't think I would have gotten nearly as much out of it if I hadn't watched it twice. Really liked the bit about where is it? I really liked the camel chewing licorice thing, which I also read while I was reading, because in the moment I'm going, I don't know if that's a thing Jet would actually say, and then he goes, I stole that, and I thought that was great, because in the moment I was like, he wouldn't have come up with that, and he didn't. I was impressed with that bit. What else did I want to mention? I have a lot of notes. You got some lack of commas. Some of you guys just not going to the comma store today. Some bits where you kind of needed a little bit more punctuation, but for the most part, your mechanics are spot on and wonderful. Like I said, I like the tonal mix a little bit more than some other folks did. I like that this wasn't a premise that I'd exactly seen before. I had countless Star Trek and Doctor Who episodes. Precisely this situation where he crashes on the planet and they like made him crash, and then like all the things that we're learning about what happened with that was fun. And also, I really liked the language bit, because it's whether or not we buy that pill. It's turning the universal translator on its head, because we always have that question of like, how come all the aliens can speak English? And then he gets there, and the big joke is he did all this school for no I think that's so funny. It turns that on its head, and I've never exactly seen that before. But yeah, I don't have a ton of gripes. I enjoyed this a lot, and am excited to read more about it. Anybody else have anything before we let Wendell ask some questions? Wendell, do you have any questions?
A ton, but I'll limit it.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. So you guys don't know this, but one of my jobs is writing music for film and media, and my second job is teaching. Yeah. Dimitri, you spit some bars, I'll drop some beats, and we'll create a theme for this workshop, you know? We can have Cap sing. He just released his Go the Fuck to Church debut single, so... Yeah, so my second job is teaching English to foreigners, especially pronunciation. I spend 8 hours of my day talking to many nationalities across the world, and so that is going to be a big part of this story. What I'm struggling with in chapter 1, and this is all I've written, by the way, what I'm struggling with here is that I don't know with that line of like, well, now they speak English, so I don't know if you can buy him as a linguist just yet, or whether I should insert more things for you to believe that. It's not something anyone commented on, but
Well,
yeah, I'm worried about that.
we're not like professional language studiers, so like it
Okay.
never occurred to me. So like I
Yeah.
don't know. What
Okay,
that's
but
supposed
can
to-
I just throw out real quick that the number of parallels between your story and Brendan's story is uncanny?
I know,
Like
right?
there's like he starts with a psycholinguist, and then your guy's like a linguist, and then there's like a mention of interdimensional stuff, but it's not that. It's just like it just goes on and on. What happened? What's going on? Anyway, what are the odds?
Brendan's in the next room. Yeah.
I thought it looked like the same house. Anyway, like on opposite sides of the world. Wendell, what else do you have for us?
You're right when you pick up on I'm trying to balance like hard sci-fi with comedy. I'm always leading with comedy first, and like literally the moment like I'm trying to figure out the language problem without using a universal translator or a Babelfish or insert anything else from sci-fi, I'm taking a paracetamol for myself and I'm thinking, oh, I'll just use a pill. So that's not thought through at all, and I do want to make those things work. I do want to find that balance between the two, because I think a lot of hard science fiction that I've read takes itself too seriously, and I really want to fill that niche so I can get people into sci-fi, and maybe the comedic route is the way to do it. So
Yeah, that's really cool.
yeah, I don't want to explain it too much, but yeah, that trying to find that balance is difficult, and the comedy, seeing what works for you, and more importantly, what doesn't work, is really important to me to know like which jokes land, which jokes don't.
But Wendell, are you with me? This isn't for everybody, and it doesn't have to be like.
Yeah, right. It is a specific humor, and it's kind of a blend of what I read. I've read a lot of Douglas Adams and Terry Pratchett, and I've also read a lot of Anne McCaffrey and Octavia Butler. So like, the balance there is real. It's my bookshelf basically. So yeah.
Yeah, and clearly you read a lot.
Yeah.
What
I was worried about pacing too. Like, does the pace work well?
I thought so.
Yeah,
I
I
didn't-
have no issue there.
I didn't read all of this. I got to page 15 and then I had to go do something, and by the time I got back, I needed to move on to the next story. I try to read them all the day of, that way it's still fresh in my mind. So I do apologize for that.
No worries. It's a long piece.
Yeah.
The scene, like the long sequence of them talking and getting to know each other and like explaining the situation. Maybe that could be like, you could get through that a little bit faster, but like that's just me thinking about something now. It didn't really occur to me or stop me too much from doing it well at the time. So make of that what you will.
I thought there were a lot of places where you really easily could have done the Douglas Adams thing and ran off with yourself and spent like 15 pages explaining a background of something or the science behind something, and I was impressed that you didn't do that. And the couple of places where you got on the verge of that, you get off the train pretty quick, and it usually ends with like a pretty amusing kind of cap-off joke that made the whole trip worth it. So yeah, I don't have pacing issues, and more than that, I was impressed that you managed to, I thought pretty effortlessly get a lot of personal details in instead of like as you're telling the story, as opposed to constantly interrupting yourself or resorting to flashbacks or anything like that.
Good, because I wrote this backwards. I started with the scene where he's captured, and then I went all the way back, and I just thought, oh, that's a good joke. I'll write a paragraph about that. Oh, maybe that joke will work. I'll write a paragraph about that.
Okay.
And then that was in one day, and then I spent 6 days trying to make sense of everything. So I'm glad that's working.
Yeah, that's it. I wouldn't have guessed patchwork with this. That's really interesting.
I'm starting to get Baghead Studios flashbacks.
Oh my God, Bag! I can't wait for you to meet Bag, that guy, and I can't wait to see what you have to say about his work because he's fascinating. He is a poet who's trying really hard to write stories that aren't just poems, and they're wonderful, and I love them. Okay, anything else that you wanted to ask us specifically, Wendell?
Nope, that's what I have.
I've got reviews to make, so I've got to get going. Okay, was there anything else that didn't get said about any of the stories that you guys wanted to go ahead and mention that you're just burning, that like you're not gonna sleep well tonight if you don't get something out?
I'm glad you guys enjoyed what you read of mine. I was really nervous going into this.
This was a real fun night.
Yeah.
Really good eclectic group. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about how much genre spanning we did today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No two things exactly alike. Okay, anybody have the last thing we always like to do in the workshop is bring up any like general kind of writing questions, either like writing life questions, just talking about the act of doing the thing, your kind of general like you know like sit down at the table and do the thing, or just mechanical things. Any just kind of broad topic anybody wants to bring up and talk about for a second with regards to the craft.
I had one that I wrote down, but my phone is now dead, so like I can't.
Well, thanks for trying to come prepared.
I'll have two next time, I guess.
Wendell, how much do you read? How many hours a day do you read? How many hours a week do you read?
A few hours a week. Yeah, I don't have much time with 2 jobs, a family, and a barking dog. But I read. What I do read is I do read a lot of fantasy, but I read a lot of different genres as much as I can, just because I think it will help my writing. You know, I have got that dreaded first novel written, and it was horrible. It was really, really bad. So I'm happy to get that out of the way. But yeah, and I'm really happy to meet Jacob too, because I dabble with fantasy. I write a fantasy story and then a sci-fi story, and so I haven't ever done first person before, and that's why I wanted to use this group to kind of test that out. I really hate first person. I think it's really depressing.
So do I.
Yeah, it annoys me. So.
And I'm also
Yeah.
really surprised, and this will show you how much I appreciate what you wrote, because I usually comment on. I usually have something to say about that, and it didn't even occur to me that it was first person. Like, it was pretty natural that way. I thought. But yeah, and I'm the most critical of first person.
Yeah.
Sometimes to a fault. I'm real quick, and I guess a lot of this group has been writing first person, and everybody's been getting a lot better at it. If I had issues with it at the beginning, because I don't think I've mentioned this needs to be in third person in a really long time for anybody.
It's really limiting, and I'm pretty hardcore with fantasy. I have I'm head hopping between 6 different heads. You know, that's the way I write that. So
And
restricting myself to one is a bitch. It really is.
That's funny though, because I tend to usually only like third person limited. Like, if you came in and I had to read 25 pages of head hopping, I would go mad. It drives me crazy. I'm not saying it can't be done well. Every now and again I'll read a Stephen King novel where he does it, and I'm like, I should be complaining about this. It's not bothering me. I don't know why it's not bothering me. It should be a problem, but it's not. But yeah, I was surprised to hear that you're as big of a fantasy guy as you are, because after reading your story, I assumed you were just a real hardline sci-fi guy.
I watch a lot of sci-fi. Yeah, My adolescence was just reading Douglas Adams. So yeah, thanks, Dad, for that.
Yeah, that was clear. Like I said, I wrote in my notes. I was like, if you don't know Adams, then I'm done. Like, just doesn't
Right, and also
wouldn't
to
even
me,
make sense.
the story is just like a real parallel to like my life in Mexico as well. Like I'm not saying I met someone with my face, definitely not in Mexico.
No, I was
But-
just gonna
This one
comment
time
on
I
that.
met this person with my face. He had purple hair too. I was like, this is recent. This is a recent choice you made. All right, guys. Well, I've really got to get going. Thanks for hanging out and for reading the stories and for all of the advice and criticisms and praises. And I hope everybody got a lot out of it. We will convene again next month. And does anybody have a preference for nights? Is Friday become a bad time for people? Because I can move it to another night. Tuesdays are possible. What else is
Nights are
possible?
probably best for me being in Australia, to be honest, because it's just morning here and there.
Oh yeah, sure.
Now.
I'm sorry, man.
Yeah, so
See, I was worried about Wendell because I assumed he was in England, and then when I found out he was in Mexico, I was like, I'm not worried about him anymore.
Nope, same time.
Yeah. Fridays are perfect for me. I have nothing going on, and other than work the next day, but my schedule tends to fluctuate from weekend to weekend. So
Okay.
Yeah, Fridays are generally good, but if I know it enough in advance, I can probably work around most days. But Friday is a nice one.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, we'll hang on to this for now, like we have been, and I'll let you guys know when the next one's going to be. I want to give you guys enough time to be able to write and read, of course, so probably toward the end of next month again, or maybe like third week again like that. I would hate to do first or second, because that wouldn't give you guys much time to do anything.
I mean, my stuff's already done, so like I don't know about the rest
I,
of it.
I have my next part done too.
I've got a lot on my plate now, so yeah, more time would be better.
So he needs time. And Wendell
I've
said
got no
he's-
idea where I'm going. No idea. I'll find out.
we'll give you guys a little bit of time, and then we'll find out what everybody else is doing. I know
I'm back next
Kareem
week on
came
Batman.
back to Patreon, but I haven't heard from him yet. So he came back to the $10 tier. I assumed he was going to be here a couple weeks ago, and I have not heard anything from him. So I'll have to reach out to him and find out when and if he's coming back. Bag hopefully can make it next time. I feel like we've got one or two other guys we haven't heard from in a while. And I'll put my feelers out and see if anybody else is interested in joining us, because we've still got some potential slots. Although I don't want to do more than 4 stories in a night if we can help it. I'll sooner go back to two segments if I need to. But anyway, okay, guys. Well, I appreciate it. I hope you guys had a good time. I certainly did.
Oh, yeah.
And I always love seeing you guys. Dimitri, thanks for joining us. Brendan, thank you for joining us. Jacob, your stuff is depressing, but I'm enjoying it a lot. And Wendell, it was so wonderful to meet you, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate all your notes. I appreciate you. Cap, the first video I saw of you was, is Captain Logan like too obsessed with Star Trek? I'm just one of those lurkers that just have never commented.
You go back that
So-
far?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. I still have like 1,000 of Vince's jokes in my head. Like I won't be using them in my story, but they're there.
Oh my God, Vince is hilarious. My favorite thing, still to this day, that Vince has ever said was his cake rant, the cupcake rant. It's still
I
the,
know what you
funniest
mean.
thing. Cupcake, a giant cupcake is just a cake. And it just never gets old. It's still funny. All right, well, thanks, guys. I'll see you later.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah, good to see you guys again.
Thanks.
Nice
Bye.
meeting
Bye.
you and everybody else.
See ya.